Hello and welcome to Nexus Extra. On this week's show, we've been looking at how important it is to keep Ghislaine Maxwell alive until her trial in July 2021, a year away. We've been talking about that because a lot of people have said that the jail she is staying in is quite unsafe, and they are very concerned, given what happened to her ex-boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein, that she could either take her life or be killed by a fellow inmate, or even, and this was her lawyer's concern, contract COVID-19. Well, today on Nexus Extra, we are joined by Stephen Hoffenberg. Stephen Hoffenberg knew Jeffrey Epstein very well back in the 80s and 90s. They worked together at Towers Financial. Mr. Hoffenberg is a former Wall Street financier and the former owner of the New York Post. He actually went to jail for some 18 years because of a Ponzi scheme in which Epstein was allegedly involved. And today he is joining us because he wants to explain his role in the entire Epstein affair out of a sense of duty to the victims. Mr. Hoffenberg, you spent 9 years interacting directly with Jeffrey Epstein in the workplace. What kind of man was he?
Yes, Jeffrey Epstein was a very unusual man in his desires and dreams to come out to become ultra powerful and ultra rich. His whole life was a platform to become rich and powerful, and that was his focus daily. And it was a very unusual personality, a lot of ability. He had a unique way of getting under your skin and was charming, very nice to deal with, very kind in the way he would manipulate you. This was a master manipulator, and that's the type of personality he had. He did seek to control the person he was befriending, and he did a great job at that, terrific job at that, as you've seen with two presidents of the United States, Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, and your Prince Andrew in the UK. He got under his skin, terribly so.
And why do you feel a sense of responsibility, perhaps even guilty, about his meteoric rise into the strata of the so-called elite?
The way you pose the question, why do you feel the responsibility, or why was Jeffrey seeking to become part of the social elite? He used it as a business tool. That was his interest. As Ghislaine Maxwell became his number one business tool with Prince Andrew and President Donald Trump and President Bill Clinton and Leslie Wexner and Alan Dershowitz and Darren Indike. I could go on and name after name of people he was able to get under the skin with and convince that they should be friends of his, close friends of his. And he used all these people effectively, like he used me and set me up for the fall that I took in the courtroom, which is remarkable how he was named in the Towers Financial case, and then his name was removed, totally and completely removed from the cases. And there was no explanation provided to the Washington Post, one of the newspapers in Washington, D.C., who was able to secure all the transcripts. Jeffrey Epstein's name was in the case that I was set up in, and I should have gone to trial in, and I was stopped from going to trial, because if I would have gone to trial, Jeffrey Epstein would have been found guilty. And this whole terrible catastrophe would have never occurred. So please go ahead.
What about the pair of them, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell? Obviously, you spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein. Did you ever spend time with the couple, so to speak?
I refused to spend time with Ghislaine Maxwell only because I rejected the request of Jeffrey Epstein's handlers, which is the title given to the people that you work with if you're gathering intelligence. And Jeffrey Epstein was handled very effectively by Sir Douglas Leese in the Leese family, and they were assisting the folks in the UK with information that they were working on in the Middle East and around the world. And Jeffrey Epstein, after being thrown out of Bear Stearns, went to work for Sir Douglas Leese in the UK, traveling the world, doing business for him as an investment banker.
It's alleged that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein had links to Israel's intelligence services, and that essentially Epstein would entice rich and powerful men into his various properties around the world, film their exploits with young women, sometimes underage women, in order to blackmail them. Do you know anything about this? Is there any credibility to these reports whatsoever?
Oh, yes. I work with the girl rape victims daily in interaction, and I spend a vast amount of time with these lovely girls that have been emotionally and psychologically traumatized by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. She's as bad as he is, if not worse. And they took advantage and misused and raped these girls, the two of them together. It's the most disgusting, horrible set of crimes one could imagine. It's terribly evil, horribly evil. And
What's the
Ghislaine
bigger
Maxwell,
picture here, Mr. Hoffenberg? What were Jeffrey Epstein and his handlers and Maxwell, what were they hoping, apart from their own perverted sexual gratification, what sort of benefits were they hoping to get out of this?
well, they were able to secure a great deal of information about the consideration toward Israel. And I'm not trying to make allegations. I want to be sensitive to the point of not attempting to charge anybody, but I'm an eyewitness to what occurred. And I had direct interaction with all these principals. So I saw it and I heard it. And what they were doing was gathering information that would be important for Israel or the UK to understand about the thoughts of the politicians and the rich and famous people in America. That was the plan. And that was very effective. And Ghislaine Maxwell was actually in charge of that. People don't know that yet, but the victims have confirmed that Ghislaine Maxwell was in charge of the audio and videotaping systems that moved forward to the others involved in the audio and videotaping atrocities. These were crimes. Very sad. Very.
A friend of Ghislaine Maxwell's is reported in the British press anyway to have said that she is a very astute woman and that she would have made copies for her own insurance to make sure that she will never be prosecuted because she has powerful people in her pocket. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, they have said that Ghislaine Maxwell made a set of copies of the tapes that were transferred to others, and they were transferred directly from the homes and possibly airplanes of Jeffrey Epstein to another man that was deeply involved with Jeffrey Epstein, deeply involved. And that allegation has been made, and it hasn't been well publicized yet because it's only spoken about by the victims who were there, who actually saw this firsthand. I know it to be true firsthand that these tapes, audio and videotapes, were being made and were being transferred to one of Jeffrey Epstein's associates by Ghislaine Maxwell's guidance. Yes. Or
Two
Prince Andrew
witnesses.
doesn't know about this. Prince Andrew of the UK does not know about this, that he was tape recorded. So it's a very unusual case.
Yeah. You gave some of your time and remarks to a major Netflix documentary. Also featured in that documentary was a former Jeffrey Epstein employee and, of course, an alleged victim, Virginia Giuffre. Both of them say that they saw Bill Clinton on Epstein's island, which has been dubbed Paedophile Island. He denies that categorically, that he ever went on that island, although his name is registered in Jeffrey Epstein's private jet's logbook. It is not shown or proved anywhere that he went to the island, except for these two witnesses. What more can you tell us?
Well, there are a number of witnesses that have established that President Bill Clinton did go to the island. And, you know, politicians in America are very worried and shocked about this Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein story. This is the worst political scandal in American history so far that's currently taking place. So President Bill Clinton wants to separate himself from this. But I spoke to the journalist that recorded that original story and did view the flight logs, and there was no question, unfortunately for President Bill Clinton, that he did go on the airplane and he was at the island, and that was confirmed by many sources.
Not to say that anyone said that they saw him doing anything wrong there, but that they saw him there. Just to be clear, both the former employee and Virginia Giuffre, they didn't say that he did anything wrong there. They just said that he was there, according to them. Let's turn to the current president, President Trump. In a press conference within the last few hours, he said that he's met Ghislaine Maxwell several times and he wishes her well. I mean, you would expect him to put a great deal of distance between them, as he did with Epstein, and to say he hopes that justice is done or something like that. I mean, you cannot get into the mind of President Trump, but why do you think he said, "I wish her well"?
It's a shocking point, the fact that President Donald Trump reacted that way, and he didn't distance himself or talk about the victims or talk about Prince Andrew or talk about the story. He was caught off guard, and his reaction was a person that did have an emotional participation with Ghislaine Maxwell and felt that emotional bond in answering the question. That was shocking to Americans and to the American media. He's gotten tremendous, terrible press over what he said at that news conference.
Could it be that President Trump, like many people around Ghislaine Maxwell or who knew Ghislaine Maxwell, including her close friend, think that she may also have been a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, caught in his orbit and unable to leave?
Well, that is a ridiculous and outrageous point that should not be given any merit, because Ghislaine Maxwell is equal to Jeffrey Epstein in what occurred in the criminal misconduct for the $1 billion that is now available to be seized, and for the victim's tragedy. Ghislaine Maxwell is not a victim. Ghislaine Maxwell is somebody terribly involved in this case. And she must realize that her role is now to talk truthfully and straighten out her life. I believe she's in emotional shock.
Yeah, you say that you have first-hand information on her personal, emotional, physical well-being in jail, and up-to-date information. I'm not going to ask you where you get that from because I know it might compromise your sources, but what have you heard?
She's in shock emotionally. She can't believe what's happening to her. The custody housing is horrible because the change of her lifestyle is so dramatic for her that she's now being held in a very small prison cell 24 hours a day in paper clothing. She's being videoed around the clock. She's being guarded around the clock by staff. She's being moved into a different cell regularly, probably every day or every other day, in order to reduce the risk on her life. She really has to be put into witness custody housing right now. Otherwise, her life is definitely at risk. There's no question that her life is at risk, and she should be transferred at once.
It's alleged that Maxwell and Epstein, did carry out abuse over decades, and that they were not prosecuted because they were protected. It is really only under President Trump's presidency that we've seen the attempted prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein and now the current prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell. You've mentioned in the past that you think something has changed politically that removes this protection from them. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, people like yourself in journalism are focusing now on this horrible mystery of crimes hurting so many raped young girls, underage girls, and girls that were manipulated into rape by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And Prince Andrew has been charged with that, and Alan Dershowitz has been charged with that by the victims, and very high profile men in the political zone in America are supposed defendants for this kind of misconduct. And it's a terrible, terrible scandal here in America. It's the worst scandal that's taking place today.
What happened politically is what I was asking. And to be clear, Prince Andrew and Alan Dershowitz, both men, deny all allegations against them, and they've been charged with nothing. So let me ask you about the politics, though. Trump's in power, suddenly decades of whatever evil secret acts that have been going on, suddenly addressed in the courts. And I was asking really if the politics at the top has changed and made it easier for these prosecutions to happen.
The election that's going to take place in America in November of this year is probably what's driving the exposure of this case, because the candidates are President Donald Trump and former President Joe Biden will be officially the
former
candidate.
Vice President.
Yeah, Joe Biden will be the Democratic candidate. Now, Vice President Joe Biden, I'm going to say right now, will definitely raise the issue of what President Donald Trump did yesterday. in his point of reference to Ghislaine Maxwell, which was shocking in America. Shocking. And it's very important for disclosure in the American political category that this case come to light now judicially. And with Epstein's death in prison, the case was quieted down in the judicial system for the last approximate year. But now the case has substantial life with the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's going to cooperate, and she's going to name names. And Prince Andrew is definitely been charged, and Alan Dershowitz has been charged.
Let me ask you a final question. You now work with alleged victims of Maxwell and of Epstein. Can you tell me how you got into this, what you do for them?
Well, I give them support, emotional support, and guidance, and I answer all their questions about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and I explain the participation of the other named persons in the mystery story. And I explain the $1 billion that's remaining now for the victims to attempt to receive payment of damages from. So there's questions coming every day to me from these victims, and they deserve direct answers, and they deserve an emotional support system because they have been terribly damaged and harmed psychologically and physically.
Stephen Hoffenberg, thank you very much for your contribution to Nexus Extra today, and thank you at home and on your mobiles for watching. Thank you. Well, thanks for watching our program. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends and family, and even subscribe.